Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Welcome back to the Fort Worth 148 Masonic podcast. My name is Evve Kirkendall. I'm the past master and a chaplain of Fort Worth 148.
My name is Sean DeBon, Junior Past Master of 148.
I am Brandy Patton, current Wurstel Master of 148.
And I'm Cody Cox, current Senior Warden of Fort Worth Lodge, number 148.
Welcome back, gentlemen. We are trying something new today in case our humble listeners did not know. You are able to now see us on camera. We are doing our first live recorded podcast here, and this is going to be released to YouTube so people could actually see what we look like and see what our little setup looks like. Our brother
Surprise!
Cody has set up this amazing studio for us, and we've got lighting, we have sound, we have all the things, and so we're going to give this a try and see how it works out. And if you like it, let us know, and if you don't like it, well,
Don't let us know. We don't care.
Because you're probably not following us anyway.
Except for one person, Supreme Leader, if you're watching or listening,
Yeah.
please let us know what you
Please
think.
let us know what you, if you like this, we're doing it thinking of you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Here come the comments. Look at those ugly dudes. Why
Right.
are they on camera?
Wow, their voices don't sound anything like what they
And
really look
public
like.
comments
Cruise missile.
off.
Right? So, but at any rate, this is what we look like, and so welcome. Today, for our warm-up topic, we decided that we're going to talk a little bit about Masonic education. What's out there? Where do we think that the gaps are in Masonic education, both that the Grand Lodge provides, but also what about on the Lodge side? Where should we be paying our attention? So let's start off with that question. What do we think of the current education that we see being provided or being encouraged by Grand Lodge?
Well, I would say one thing is just to make sure that our listeners know, we're talking about Masonic education in Texas. So for those of you that don't know, I'm the current district education officer for our district. So my job basically is to be available to lodges to talk about Masonic education. We're not talking about things like the esoteric education. We're talking about Grand Lodge law, the way that things are supposed to be done.
Secretary school, treasurer school,
Yeah,
those
that
sorts
kind of
things.
stuff. We're supposed to
Briscoe
supposed to do
workshops.
that and be available for those types of things. I will say on my end of what I'm seeing is I'm not getting a lot of requests from lodges for that particular type of education because honestly, I think that they either don't know there's certain things that they probably should know that they don't know how to ask, or it's just not something that they think about.
Would you say that the district education officer's role is a resource tool or an actual facilitator?
I would say that we're supposed to be a resource.
Okay.
If the lodge doesn't have somebody there to execute those particular things, of course I can come and help a lodge with those types of things. So it's kind of a dual type thing. I would prefer to be invited to lodges to do a little education piece or something like that. But it is what it is.
Can I call you Sunday for a Master Mason lecture on Monday? Is that part of your
You know
job?
what? I'm sorry. I'm sick.
I know that. So one thing that we're supposed to be doing as Texas lodges is that every stated meeting we're supposed to have some sort of reading of Grand Lodge law, right? It doesn't have to be extensive, right? But generally the way it's done is that the junior warden or some other delegate of the worshipful master takes a moment to pick a Grand Lodge law topic and give a brief explanation. It doesn't even have to take more than 5 to 7 minutes, even. And we're pretty diligent about it. Unless they're like, we'll not do it if, say, we have a district deputy grand master visiting or some other.
Or a Grandmaster's decision, we'll read that in lieu of.
If a grand master's decision comes out, we'll use that opportunity to educate the lodge on the grand master's decision. But
I'm trying to make it pertinent too.
I will make a comment on that one though. I think if your lodge is doing like Grand Lodge law or something like that, it's been my experience sometimes with other lodges when I go and see that it's kind of like I get the feeling that they just kind of flipped through the book and went, "Yeah, I think I'll just read this." Like I think that you should have some forethought to kind of go, "I know that I'm going to be doing this at the at the meeting. I need to give it some thought and something that I'm kind of passionate about, and I think you guys have probably seen this when it comes to Masonic education, is I want lodges to be places where the members of the lodge feel free to share something that they have observed or learned themselves and kind of share that out in lodge and then allow a space for people to have an exchange of ideas and go, yeah, I kind of looked at that particular idea in this way, but I have also looked at this as well. And so you kind of start to get this kind of collective feed. That's what I would really like to see as far as Masonic education in lodges myself.
So how do you feel about the Masonic education? Let's say, because before we started recording today, we were kind of talking about things like Briscoe workshops and leadership 101, 201, and 301. The Worshipful Masters program that some people have been a part of. I know Sean was a part of it during his year, and he has some thoughts on that. But what do you feel like the success has been in those programs with lodges or participation? And do you feel like there are areas where maybe there's educational needs out in the field that we need to start thinking about and maybe shoring up in lodges now that we could talk about, in this venue?
I can definitely jump in for the Grand Lodge of Texas Officer Leadership Training Program, OLT, what we call it. The 101 class was fantastically beneficial for a young new officer coming into the line. It was, I I appreciate that it's required, that one. Just as my opinion. And then the 201 was kind of take it or leave it for me. And then instead of doing the 301, like you mentioned, I did the Worshipful Master workshop, and I have thoughts.
I did the 301, and it's basically like the best Masonicon you could go to without all the fellowship stuff. I mean, the education pieces you get Masonicon, Grand Lodge did a great job of putting that together for 301.
I've heard that several times too, because I didn't
From
get a
me, I'm
chance
trying
to
to
go.
sell it.
Well,
So it's
and
great.
I've heard it from you, but I've also heard it from other people who have attended and said that it was their favorite because it went beyond the basics of like what they learned in 101 and perhaps 201.
Yeah, it gets an esotericism. It teaches the history and why we do certain things. And like the Master Mason degree, it gives you a timeline of how long it really should take from step to step, which you don't really think about. You're talking about having to go hundreds of miles on foot.
Sure.
No, it's like 5 minutes. No, you got to think about the time.
Yeah.
I didn't get that without going to 301.
Would you call that esotericism, or would you call that more just history and then
Well, I didn't
process?
I didn't know it, so it was esoteric until I learned it.
Well, fair point. Fair point.
I would say with so for those of you that are outside of the jurisdiction of Texas, the Briscoe workshops, these are series of scenarios that come out from the Grand Lodge each year that we kind of present to Master Masons, and we say, pretend that you're in Lodge XYZ and this is something that's happened. And it's giving them a chance to think about, if this were to happen in my lodge, how would I respond? And is that, according to Grand Lodge law, correct or incorrect? And we just did a Briscoe workshop here in Fort Worth.
You were on the panel, as I remember,
Yeah,
because
I
I
presented
saw your little digital cutout on the
my
poster.
digital cutout. My pretty face all over there again. But anyway, so with the Briscoe workshop, we had let's say about 30 guys that showed up. The DDGMs were there and things like that. So that was nice, and we had some good conversations. And again, the Briscoe workshops are only opened up to Master Masons. So that may, one thing that I think a lot of people forget here in the jurisdiction of Texas is that those Briscoe workshops, I believe, every secretary has like access to it online. And then, of course, the DEOs, we have copies of them, and we can get copies to lodges. So if lodges are thinking about, well, I need some Masonic education, well, if you're open in a master's degree, you can do, one of these scenarios from the Briscoe workshop. So there's that. I think a lot of people also forget about when it comes to just Masonic education, besides opening up the law book, open up the monitor. Find something in the monitor that interests you and present on that. Or ask a brother. The worshipful master can appoint a brother and say, hey, next Masonic meeting, I want you to present an education piece on this particular thing, and then allow for, again, like a Q&A session. There's nothing wrong with that.
So I'm logged into Grandview right now, just looking. We have access to 2023, 2024, and the fall 2025 under Master Mason resources in Grandview. So every Master Mason has access to it.
Yeah, and so this is something as well. If you've got access to it, you can have Masonic education yourself. Go and find something that interests you, take it to your lodge, and have a discussion.
Another thing that makes us really fortunate, I think, here is Committee on Work members. When we have the opportunity to have Committee on Work members come and just visit your lodge unofficially, sometimes you can strong arm them into giving you some sort of little, quick education piece too, especially, ritual work. And Lord knows, most of us need some sort of detailed explanations, even if we're good at ritual, that can help us be better. I know the big one, like we always think about how some lodges are big ritualists and some lodges aren't, but all of us could improve ourselves, I think, pretty easily.
I undersold Grandview. It actually goes back to 1962.
Oh, well, then never mind. We have plenty of that.
It has the last 3 listed separately. Then you click on Briscoe Workshop, and you can go to all of them back to. It's ridiculous. There's just so much info there.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that in the Metroplex, at least, there are a lot of lodges, and if we have questions or if we have issues or challenges, it's very easy for us at 148 and to go over to one of our sibling lodges across the building, and it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Or we can call up our Committee on Work member, or there's any number of things that we can do. I'm thinking about what does education look like out in the more rural areas where they don't have a lodge literally like next door or up the street or around the corner like we do. What does education look like for a more rural lodge?
I think with that one, it's going to take planning. So it's not something that can necessarily be spur of the moment type thing. So say for instance a Briscoe workshop that was going to be happening out in West Texas, that's going to take some planning and some getting together on that one. But I will say that I think sometimes in those rural lodges, you're going to find a lot stronger tie between maybe a lodge in one town and a lodge in another town, because oftentimes those lodges have the same members, like they belong to quite a few of those lodges and stuff like that. So I think the difference there is the planning that needs to happen with that one. Whereas here in the Metroplex, we can kind of snap our fingers and things can happen like that. Does it happen well? It depends.
How is Supreme Leader going to know what the Metroplex is from North Korea?
Well, the Supreme
He has maps. They have maps in North Korea.
Does it say the Metroplex
how
on the
dare
map?
how dare you question the Supreme Leader? He knows all.
He knows Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman played in Dallas.
He did, didn't he?
So where the Mavericks play about 85 miles.
He was on the San
circle.
Antonio Spurs.
Also the Mavericks.
He played for the Mavs?
For a minute.
Traitor.
He was homeless at one point. And he got caught stealing sunglasses at DFW Airport. Before
he was
in the
homeless
Navy.
while he played for the
Well,
Dallas Mavericks.
Wow. Well, good for him.
If Dennis Rodman, if you hear this, we apologize for bringing up bad memories.
Oh, they were great memories. He had a great time.
And Fearless Leader, we're still waiting for our signed picture.
No,
Yes.
but truly though, we say the Metroplex a lot. We're talking about the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's where we are. But for the listeners that aren't here, when we say that, we have a good, probably 100-mile radius.
7 million people roughly.
8.1 now.
Oh,
Yeah, we've got
8.1
more
million
more
people.
people in our area than many states have
Our
in total.
airport's bigger
Well,
than Manhattan.
Just to let you guys
Yeah.
know,
One of
when
our
we went to
airports.
Broken Bow for my birthday, we left here, from my house, and we went kind of in a northwesterly or northeasterly direction. it was 2.5 hours before we were out of the quote unquote Metroplex.
Yeah.
2.5 hours.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
traffic and evening traffic, especially a Friday.
Yeah.
There are
Oh, yeah.
states that you can drive across in that period of time.
We're projecting,
So-
fun fact, not that it matters, but we're projecting in the next 20 years over 12 million people in the DFW Metroplex.
And so, but I think that my point is in asking that question about rural versus more urban lodges kind of leans into this idea of it, because it seems to me that Grand Lodge is moving into a technology based direction. I think that some of the advances that we've seen in the way that Grand Lodge disseminates information, the way that we are expected to get information from the Grand Lodge and from officers, excuse me, leans into.
I'm not editing that out.
That was weird. Like I just had like a hiccup and a cough at the same time. That was weird. But it seems like technology is a big piece of Grand Lodge's plan going forward. And I'm wondering because I'm from rural West Texas, and I know that technology is not always the first thing that people are accessing.
You mean San Angelo's not metropolitan?
Listen,
I'm
San
not saying it's
Angelo's
not
where
metropolitan.
they have the mansions in San Angelo. Okay.
But I wonder how much of this sort of stuff is being communicated, because Brandy is kind of the Grandview expert. I think every time we talk about something, he knows something that's on Grandview. He knows, he's dug through it because he was our secretary, and I think that he just peruses it in his off time.
Free time, yeah.
But how many of our lodges, both in and out of a metro area, know the technological opportunities for education and information that's available?
I think one thing that needs to be said is that there are secretary schools that are put on by the Grand Lodge of Texas that are Zoom sessions and things like that. Yes, I know we're talking technology here. Same thing for treasurers and things like that. But my answer to that would be, how do we get these rural lodges to know this information's out there? That's really where we need to lean on people like the DEO, the district communication officer, and honestly, the DDGM. When the district deputy grand master goes to visit, maybe that should be something that's also in his purview to say, like, hey, do you know about these particular things? I know that when I was DDGM, we didn't necessarily have that kind of like on our checklist, but I did try as best as I could to like double check with the secretary and say, like, hey, did you realize that this was on on Grandview and things like that? So that's where, again, I think in the grand scheme of things, the Grand Lodge is going to need to rely on those types of officers to disseminate that information.
Probably explain what Grandview is.
Grandview is this wonderful thing that is available to secretaries.
Well, so Grandview is a member database that not all jurisdictions use, but all the ones that
Quite
I
a
know
few.
of use.
Yeah.
And it's, if you're in Tennessee, you're in Nebraska, Texas, it looks exactly the same.
And in fact, there's some of the appendant bodies that are starting to use that. I know that like Daughters of the Nile apparently is using a Grandview-esque type system.
And it's gotten considerably better in the last 5 years since I've been using it.
I want to kind of touch on what you're saying, Cody. I think the district officers, grand officers, district deputies, DEOs, district instructors, all those people should be the face-to-face kind of sell point for using this technology. But another thing too that I know I have done personally, and other brothers of the lodge I've traveled with, Brother Omar, our junior warden, and when we travel,
I haven't seen him lately.
oh, he's
Oh,
sitting,
yeah.
He's
Sitting right
here
o-
just
he's
off
sitting right
camera,
over
so,
there.
on his cell phone.
He's planning our meals.
That's right.
But when we go and travel and visit Texas lodges, often we take an opportunity to teach something.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do it in a condescending way, like, oh my God, you guys aren't doing this. What's wrong with you? But you can just be
Dues are
helpful.
only $50.
Haven't heard that one before.
I have done that. I'm sorry. But no, like, hey, you guys can do this or that, or you know, if you overhear a conversation when you're visiting a lodge about, say, for example, when we changed to the hard dues cards and how
Yeah.
the QR code works and how you check status, and you know, you can be like, oh, show them how it works. You know, grab the secretary, be like, do you know how this works? I know how this works. I can teach
What,
you.
you mean we should be fraternal and
What?
act like we're brothers and like, you know,
Well, let's
make sure that
pivot. Let's pivot now for a moment.
gonna
'cause
pivot.
We've kind of talked about the things that we are doing. Where do we see the blind spots and the places where we need some help? Where is the education that you all think that lodges need, or from your perception and travels, what are some things that the Grand Lodge has done not maybe as well? I'm thinking here of the feedback that we've gotten from the Worshipful Masters program, how some of the participants, and I heard this not only from Sean, but from another Worshipful Master as well who went through the program. But where are we seeing the gaps, the problems, the things that we could shore up and do a little bit better in terms of Masonic education?
We have a program. The Grand Lodge has a program that shall remain nameless.
Oop, there goes my microphone. It's okay. Keep going. Keep going.
So I won't mention it specifically by name because I don't want to throw shade, but the program is a way for lodges to kind of grow and develop and improve on the things that their lodge function, as it were. And we call it an award, which I think is the first fatal flaw, because it's something that you just sign up for, and then you go through the check boxes, and then, hey, it's an award, and then it's some sort of a claim. Like, I don't understand why that's a claim, but it could be valuable for certain lodges in certain scenarios, but I think it's outdated. I think it needs to be rethought for today's era, especially with the technology. And then also it needs to not be set up so that a lodge has to travel to a part of the state that's far away from where it is to gain some sort of point advantage in how far along they are to achieving said award.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really has always grinded.
I'm just gonna hold it like this, okay? Listen.
you look.
It's like, listen. I feel like Kermit the Frog.
I love that. That's pretty funny.
You know what? We adapt. It's fine.
Complicated not always better.
Yeah.
But to Sean's point, I have always found it grinds my gears to no end that part of the point system. I'm just going to say it. It's the Vanguard Award. Okay, let's just call it out. It's not an award. It's an application.
I may edit this
You don't
out.
win something. The Vanguard Award, you in order to max out your points, you have to go to events that if we in the Metroplex go to it, it's literally a full day that we have to devote to going there and then getting back. And none of those high point events are in the northern half or even the central part of the state. And it grinds my gears to no ends that it skews so heavily in that direction. You can't have a state the size of Texas and lean everything into South and South Central Texas. That's
I heard
just
a collective
not okay.
sigh or something like a collective eye roll from all of our brothers in El Paso.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
I understand that they're even left out of this even more so.
Yeah.
And so that's the frustrating part of this. If you're going to have these sort of big Masonic events, which I support, I think it's great that we have events at the Alamo and Goliad and all of these things.
Live Oak.
Yeah, the Live Oak. All of these things that are really important to us.
If your entire lodge shows up to Grandmaster's conference, you offset not going to that, and that's really hard to do.
Yeah, but I mean,
But who
again,
does that?
And
Even
that's,
if we have one here in Fort Worth or in Dallas, it's hard to get an entire
Yeah.
lodge to
We
go
had-
there.
We had 8 at the last one, I think.
this brings up another big gripe too. Like everybody runs around and says, "Well, we need to get younger guys in masonry. We need a younger." Well, we got jobs, younger guys. We work.
Yeah.
We can't
I
be
don't
part
have
of
the
the
ability to drive 12 hours on a Tuesday afternoon to stay the night and go to an event so we can max out our.
I'm
Vanguard.
still doing
that just
6-year-old.
doesn't make sense.
I'm still doing a 6-year-old to dance class, a 10-year-old to karate practice, and a baseball kid, and
Just to be accurate, though, like the Alamo Observance is on a Saturday.
Fair.
What's the other ones? The Come and Take It, Bell and Gonzalez, that's on Saturday.
fair. Still a 5-hour
They
drive.
are, and it is, and I've done them both, and they're good events, but they are hard to do. The George Washington thing in El Paso is fantastic. You don't get points. for that,
9
but you
hours.
should.
Yeah.
Yeah,
9 hours
that's
from
the
DFW
thing. Like,
to El
why
Paso.
isn't something like that in El Paso being counted towards Vanguard? but things that
Maybe
are
it will now.
convenient for some other people are, and that's the problem. Is that if I were to say that our Grand Lodge needs to do anything, it is to be more responsive and aware of what's actually going on in the in masonry in our state, and recognize that this is that it's just not tenable, and then to put such a premium on the Vanguard Award.
Well, you do
I-
get premium parking at the annual.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just rolled my eyes so hard I saw my brain.
They did last year. Was it last year or the year before? Where there's a cash payment. For
I don't have a problem with the Vanguard. I understand that the Vanguard Award is valuable for some
It's a
people.
great tool for some.
It's a
lodges.
great tool for some lodge that aren't meeting the minimum standards. And I'm going to say that,
gives you an
that
idea what you
most
should
of
do.
the Vanguard things that are going on
Are minimum standard.
standard stuff. Like minimum standards. I'm not talking about you shouldn't aspire to some of these things.
You should be
These are
doing that,
things
yeah.
that you should already be doing. And if the Grand Lodge is awarding the minimum, then I'm not sure that that's really
Well, it's not the minimum. There's a maximum amount of things you're supposed to do to get it.
But some of those things on that list
Are
are the
minimums.
minimum
Right.
standard that a lodge should be doing if they want to be successful.
You could cross some things off from.
There are some things that are very aspirational, like a graded degree, for instance. We all have different thoughts about whether or not graded degrees are great. I'm not a huge fan of them because I think that they are a little too
Stuffy?
clinical and stuffy. They make things more about the procedures and the ritual work being a certain way rather than the experience of the
If
the
it didn't have to be a
initiate.
live candidate, I would like it a lot more.
Right, and
It
things
is
like that.
taken away from the
Because I don't
candidate.
want to. I'm going to be honest. Sometimes I think that these clinical graded degrees. Because I went and viewed one that was here in the Metroplex. What was it? Last year we went.
And it was a great degree.
It was a great degree, but it was super clinical,
Yeah.
and it was not about the candidate.
I'll be the guy. It's boring.
It's
It's
dry.
boring.
It's boring. It has no. There was nothing in there. It was like sterile, and it didn't feel warm. It didn't feel brotherly.
I want to point out our two veterans called it sterile.
It was. It was. There's no other way to say it. It
Y'all
might
been
have-
in very sterile situations doing the same ritual in the military, so
but there's a life.
Even
that-
still, even there, it's
there's something
emotion in the room.
about having practiced it so much that it can come to life. And the thing that I think that happens in graded degrees is the sort of practice that goes on and the sort of focus that goes on actually drains the life out of the ritual, and it makes it just dry. It's stale.
so it's not educational.
I'm
I mean,
not
to,
sure,
to
I'm not
take
sure
that
that
full
it's great.
circle, right?
I don't think that it's great, but again, I'm not here to. If that were the biggest problem that's going on in Freemasonry right now, I would say we are winning.
we have no
But
plans to do a graded degree this
We
year.
at Fort Worth 148 don't do graded degrees, largely because of that, because we don't want to compromise the initiatic experience and the candidate experience in the aspirations of receiving an award that we really don't put a lot of value on.
I was going to say, to add to this conversation, about what are some things that Grand Lodge could do to assist with education. If they're wanting us to read Grand Lodge law or something like that, I think some sort of offering or a class on how to read Grand Lodge law.
Have you been to a secretary school? You have.
One of the things that might, I mean, so I come from the church
But you're not the
world.
lawyer. The junior warden is.
No, and sometimes the junior warden doesn't
Sorry to
know.
cut you off.
No, that's fine.
Doesn't know that. So what I was saying is like, again, for those of you that are not in the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Texas, here is the law book, so you can see it. I'm showing the camera this right now. It's a big book, and we have, even at Lodge Summit, we've had discussions where we pulled out the law book.
That's not
And-
all of it. There's no Grandmaster's decisions in that.
No, this is the Grandmaster's decisions.
Oh, that's the real deal one.
Yeah, this is
How many pages?
This is my copy from when I was DDGM, so it's got almost everything in it.
There's at least 15 more pages then.
Probably,
that was
you know,
a couple
because
years
it gets updated. But what I'm saying is like, even at Lodge Summit, you had past masters sitting around, and we kind of know how to look at these laws and stuff like that. And we were still going, well, maybe it's here, you know, and we're having to find it. So I'm thinking about somebody that just became a Mason that, you know, wants to know something like that. Oh, you know, this would be
So
daunting.
also pro tip, wardens and worshipful masters, you have it in Grandview. You have access to a PDF version, which is way easier to carry around.
Yeah. You know, one thing I think that would be very helpful from Grand Lodge it would take a serious research nerd some time to do, but a cross-reference chart or a cross-reference index, because like you were saying, we were at our summit talking about laws and saying, well, maybe it's in this section, maybe it's in that section. Sometimes it's in both.
Yeah.
There's quite a few kind of key things that are referenced in law in multiple places, and some of them are flat out contradictory, if not slightly so. And so that would be something that could be a helpful tool that could be created, and maybe now we could utilize AI to kind of flush that out a little easier. But a cross-reference chart of, okay, if this is a topic, what sections of the law apply?
What's funny because the Grandmaster's decisions often are. It'll cite different.
Well, yeah, they
subsections.
do. They do, and I think jurisprudence does it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that when a grandmaster's decision comes out, obviously jurisprudence is going to look at that and say, okay, well, this is from this section of the law applies to this decision, especially if it's at a question. Like if it's one of those ones where a question is raised and then the grandmaster has to make a decision, and then they publish the grandmaster's decision, and then they tie it to what section of the law it comes from or would be related to, and that's great. But what about just a random law topic that's not in the grandmaster's decision, that's referenced in multiple sections of law?
Do a search for alcohol, for example. In the
Well,
PDF.
and the thing
There's one
is,
subsection.
honestly, if we had people that knew how to read this law book, then we probably would see a decrease in the number of problems that are popping up at lodges, because lodges would know how to handle those types of situations. I know, again, in my experience as DDGM, it was kind of like as soon as I became a DDGM, it's like everybody thought that I knew this thing backwards and forwards, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to look at that, And then again, like if a lodge asked me a question, I could look into the law book and say, well, this is where this is, in the law book, but I still wasn't like allowed to actually answer that question. I still had to go, to my boss, to the grandmaster, and ask him, and make sure that I was correct on that one. So if we're expected to know what's in here and operate according to this, we've got to know how to actually like open up the pages and find what we need to know.
The first piece of advice I got upon getting elected to the East from a past master was read the entire law book. Read it. Sit down and read it. And I failed. I tried. I made that an endeavor of mine in my personal time to just go through and read the law. I failed, but I mean, I did get
So
through
I feel
it all.
like we should have the Masonic law book through the year. You know how they have the Bible.
Well,
like, through the year,
also, in fairness, a lot of those pages are documents. They're forms, just example forms.
yeah,
There's probably
to-
100
towards
pages
the
in
back.
that are random stuff that's not. It's pictures. They're not that bad.
Well, one of the things that I was going to say is I come from the church world, and we have this thing called electionary.
What does your shirt say?
It says bad theology hurts people. And we have this thing called electionary, and it's divided into 3 books, and it recommends every Sunday a specific reading from the Bible, from both the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament and the New Testament. My point in suggesting that, saying that, is that it would be kind of helpful if there was like a Masonic law lectionary that said that this is a prescribed reading for lodges to cover in their meetings, that if you cover this over the course of let's say a rotation of 3 years, if you cover this in 3 years, you're going to go through the high points of Grand Lodge law that are really pertinent to lodges. And I realize that's difficult because we only meet on average once a month. I mean, most lodges are dark a couple of months out of the year, and they don't meet as frequently. But having some sort of prescribed reading from that people can relate to, maybe not as articulated by Grand Lodge, but
Just
some other
scared
way.
away 30% of our candidates. I gotta read that thing? No,
No, I'm not saying that candidates have to. I'm talking about when the junior
Aspiring
warden gets
officers.
up and says something in lodge, that
It's
there
just a
is
cue card.
prescribed reading that says here's something to talk about and here's some bullet points to talk
Well,
about.
and actually, I believe that in our monthly communication from the Grand Secretary, there is
There's a law
like a suggested law or something like
That
that.
would
And
be I've
but that
I've
is
never
a, that
seen
is
that,
a
so.
new thing, but it's not necessarily.
And it would be great to have like little
Grand
bullet
Lodge
points
law
about
through
that.
the year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I did when I was junior warden, though, that was helpful was that if there was something that came up in the lodge, I went and found the law that was related. And so And I know that
We
brother
often do that.
Brother Omar
Yeah.
has done that this year. For our lodge this year is the same as if we had a topic or a question or something like that,
or an issue came up.
or an issue came up. That was the law that we read that month.
Like proxy assignments, well
Right.
stated.
Yeah,
Because
proxy assignments for
heard that.
Grand Lodge.
Oh, by the way,
if we even have a Grand Lodge, don't we have to have resolutions to have?
Yeah, I think there was a Grand Lodge. Grand Lodge, are you there?
Hello.
Hello, Bueller.
Is this mic on?
Is this on?
We're recording this, in November. What is today? 22nd.
No,
23rd.
we don't give
It's-
dates.
Oh, we don't give dates. Okay.
Well, we're recording it on
Yeah.
a date before Thanksgiving, and we still have not received resolutions yet.
From an undisclosed location.
There are no airplane contrails to track, no flags, no stars to look at.
We don't talk about chemtrails. Stop it.
So, well, let's go ahead and pivot, gentlemen, to our main topic. So, we as a lodge have talked a little bit about the history of our organization and the people who have been important in
We
that
spent 34
organization.
minutes on a side topic.
I know, right?
I love
That's
this
pretty crazy. I
podcast.
love that's the way we always are. But one of the things that we wanted to I don't know, emphasize, but just think it through and talk about it and raise it as a topic on the podcast
Deep
on the
thoughts
UTAB.
with Jack Handy. That's
Deep
what this
thoughts
is.
with Fort Worth
Did-
148.
That's
Did
right.
you know that
Thoughts.
Albert Pike was a Confederate general?
I know. And what do we do with the history of people who have uncomfortable histories, like the fact that George Washington owned slaves,
Or the fact that Albert Pike commanded Indians?
that Albert Pike
You
had
can't call
these
them that.
very kind of not so
You're right. I'm sorry.
welcoming past. And then we've also got other individuals in Masonic history that have been problematic. So
Well, and the
how do we
reason-
reconcile the way that we
Right.
revere them with the fact that they also had this very sordid backstory about who
Sordid
they
lives.
were? They had a
have
sordid life.
lives.
If anyone watches Shane Gillis, he's not a brother, but he does a great take on Mount Vernon and George Washington and his teeth with Mercury and the 7-foot tall guy wearing an apron screaming at you in the woods.
Well, I think, Evie, when you and I were kind of talking about this topic, for those of you that aren't in Texas or you're not Texan, sometimes I think this seems a little bit weird. Myth looms large in Texas. When it comes to Texas history, a lot of what we learn at school, honestly, we later on find out is kind of myth. It's history written by the victors.
Like every Texas kid knows the tune to Davy
Yeah.
Crockett.
Or drawing the line in the
Right.
sand at the Alamo and all
There-
of those types of things.
There were so many train tracks in Fort Worth that it was called the Tarantula Train.
Yeah, and
Right.
it still is.
So the reason we were talking about
That was
this is
a Masonic
because
thing too. We'll get
Yeah.
to that eventually.
the reason we were talking about this is because you start thinking about these Masonic luminaries, and you start thinking about guys like Albert Pike and George Washington. These guys that you look up to,
Andrew
And-
Jackson.
and who else?
Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson, Mirabeau Lamar, those types of guys. We start talking about them, and there are Masonic brothers, the forefathers, things like that. And then you start kind of learning about their backstory, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can necessarily get behind this.
Well, we have to start with it's somewhat of to people in academic circles. It's somewhat of an adage, but it's a very, very important when you look at the past that you cannot apply today's social lens to the people of that time. Now, that's not to say that what they did wasn't horrific or that we should excuse anybody's actions from the past, but we have to understand the social settings in which those things took place, what was accepted, what wasn't, horrific or not, right? And so it's possible to look at them and see the acts of greatness that they did, or their contribution to, say, the craft of masonry or to the nation, and still say, they were people, and all people have some pretty big flaws. Even the best of us have some pretty big flaws.
And on the other side of that coin, I'm going to argue a little bit against that idea, because if you were going to have a perspective on, let's say, morality, and your morality was informed by, let's say, owning human beings as property, I think that brings all of your other moral assertions into question and makes us have to dig a little bit deeper in whether or not we should trust you as a luminary on that subject. And I think that that is worth considering. That they can definitely be people of their own time, but we cannot separate that from the moral judgments that they made.
Yeah, it's a tough thought experiment, though, to imagine a world where every single culture in the history of the world owned other humans, and up until that point, it was the normal thing for everyone, not just some people. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, well, these people had slaves and these people did. Every culture throughout the entire history of the planet, from every region of the planet, had some form of chattel slavery. And so when you're born into that, as a thought experiment for us now, I think it's pretty difficult. I think it's pretty difficult to imagine.
I don't think that it's a matter of separating those things out and like just discounting them into the waste bin of history. I think that there is a way for us to acknowledge that that they had these ideas about certain things, and then they had these other very difficult views about others. And I think that that's also worth exploring, because if we're going to refer to, let's say, somebody like, I don't know, like Albert Pike, for instance. Let's just throw him out there. I know that he's a very complex character, and this is gonna blow up in the comments. I have no doubt about it. But let's just say, for instance, that Albert Pike has these assertions. Well, we have to question then, to whom were his assertions being directed? If he's talking about Masons, what kinds of Masons is he talking about? He's not talking about black Masons, because he would not have considered them as equal to a white Mason. And so then when we look at those moral assertions and those luminary ideas that he's bringing to the table, he is starting from a place that is completely different than where we're starting. And we have to apply that to the teachings that he's bringing to the table. We can't just assume that he's speaking broadly to all Masons, because he wasn't speaking to all Masons.
Well, it's kind of like that idea that we go back to when we talk about the framers of the Constitution putting in there, we the people.
All men were
all
created
men are
equal,
created equal.
but
Okay,
they weren't.
Were they talking
according to the
about
people?
men, or were they talking about white land-owning men? Those types of things. To Albert Pike, something that I thought about, and Sean, what you had kind of mentioned in my head, some of the wheels were turning is, like when we're talking about Albert Pike and where he was living, when he was living, there were also abolitionists. So there were people out there that were actively campaigning against the idea of owning slaves. So the idea was out there. So my question would be, why? What kept Albert Pike from listening to those people and being on their side?
And by all accounts, he did eventually kind of come to the reality that
Right.
that slavery was a bad thing. I don't want to dismiss any of his later life things after he was a Confederate soldier and all those things, but I think that these are the issues that we wrestle with. We wrestle with these
still have
ideas.
them today. I mean, we have certain members, even in America, we have certain members of our society that look at other members of our society that dress, act, or love differently, and they think of them as lesser.
I
Lesser,
agree.
inferior. Those, yeah.
And I think the point that I'm kind of driving towards in my assessment of this is this idea, especially in Freemasonry, we have this idea that there is a moral value to this, that there is a moral dimension to what we do in Freemasonry. And the thing that, at least in my theology, and I think across most Christian theologies, is that if something is, I'm not going to use the word sin, because I think that that's too heavily loaded. I'm going to say if something is immoral, it's immoral today, it's immoral tomorrow, and it was immoral for all of human history. If it was the grand geometrician's plan for it to be immoral today, then it has always been immoral. It doesn't suddenly become moral because we cross a certain meridian on our planet, or because a certain year was reached, or a certain constitutional amendment was passed. That act, and I'm going to say the act of slavery, it is immoral today. It is going to be immoral forever forward,
Right.
and it has always been immoral, regardless of what people knew or didn't know. So then the question becomes, how do we reconcile those very difficult acts of immorality with the way that we see them today, and the way that we revere the words that they wrote down, and the way that we republish Albert Pike's book like ad nauseum, ad infinitum.
The same way that we Christians do with the Bible, which is largely very supportive of different kinds of slavery throughout its entire history. We have to compartmentalize, and we have to negotiate with history in our minds to see those things, and it requires a little bit of mental gymnastics, or a lot in some cases. But
I think it also does exactly what we're doing right now. It requires us to talk about it. We can't just like sweep it under the rug.
No.
Under the rug. We can't just like ignore it.
we have to see all facets too, though. Like if we're talking about the founding of our nation, for example, the removal of slavery was one of the original intents, and in a lot of the original documents of the founding, that was an intent to do immediately. Was
right.
But they realized that they weren't going to be able to get a quorum of states to join their cause at the time, and so they said, okay, this is a lofty goal. We'd love to do it, but we're not going to be able to pull it off right now and be successful.
When your economy is based on slave labor, it's hard.
Yeah, it's tough.
Until you lose your.
And there's also, and it's kind of gross to have to think about, but there are certain pragmatic realities that were going on during the colonial era in politics that did not make that possible. And I understand all that, and I largely agree with what you're saying, that these are complex people that we're talking about that had lived in a complex era, that had different pulls on their moral values. And they negotiated with their morality just as much as we negotiate with our morality today.
So to be introspective and intellectually honest, then the hard questions we have to ask are: if a thing, slavery, has existed for the majority of human history as a thing to do, we won't call it a good thing, but we'll say a thing that is done everywhere. The amount of time, relatively, that we have said it is immoral is an eye blink to the amount of time that it was acceptable.
It's still acceptable in certain parts of the world.
There are boatloads of chattel slaves in the world today that the average person is totally unaware of, but that's for another day. But the question that raises is then is it immoral? I mean, we have to ask ourselves this. I believe it is immoral. I'm not saying it's not, but looking at it through that lens, that devil's advocate, intellectual, test your theory. If the majority of human history has had slavery and the majority of humans in history said it was cool, is it immoral?
Well, did the majority of humans say it was moral because there was an economic interest that was driving the conversation?
Surely.
And absolutely, that's the
Surely.
case. And so people were being objectified and dehumanized for the purposes of financial gain and motive, which is not, as Brandy pointed out, very, very different than what's going on now. But I think that that's a side point to how we deal with these people that were participating in those institutions.
I knew you were going to play right into my question, though. So, but that's the right answer, right?
He planned that.
It's power. It's always about power and control.
Yeah, it ultimately is. But what do we do with the Albert Pikes? What do we do with the George Washingtons? What do we do with the Andrew Jacksons? What do we do?
Can we do just like we usually do with David? He was a flawed.
He was a flawed man. My bad theology hurts people.
Here's the thing, though. Everyone is deeply, deeply flawed. That's the problem. We run around and we see some people, like the hugely bad people that have done horrendous things. Hitler is obviously the one that's on everybody's mind of late. Terrible, terrible things were done by him and in his name. Right. But we mistake ourselves if we run around and think that we are largely better. We could be better, but we're all flawed.
Our NASA program advanced. Well, we didn't have NASA then. Our rocket program was tremendous after Hitler.
Yeah, discounting those political gains or those national stories.
We kind of looked the other way with Werner von Braun.
None of us.
Oh, yeah, we forgot about that.
None of us who walk this earth are free from the loaded word of sin or bad choices or bad decisions or hurting people, both intentionally and unintentionally. And I'm not saying that equates us to Hitler, but I am saying that we have to remember that. And so I think the answer, at least my answer to Evve's question, what do we do with him, is that we say, okay, Albert Pike accomplished this, and this great thing and owned slaves. And you just accept it as it is, because it just is. I work in the railroad industry, and I hate the phrase, it is what it is, but it's the most common thing that you hear people say in my industry. Wherever you go, we run into some kind of roadblock or headache or struggle or frustration. Oh, it is what it is. I hate that saying, but on some level,
Well, it goes back to your saying that you really love is that whole idea is this a problem to overcome or
or
is
an
this
environment to be lived
live
in. Yeah. Problems
it-
to be solved versus environments to be lived in.
And this, I think that one of the things in terms of what do we do with these philosophers and luminaries that we hold on high is to recognize, number one, we're holding them on high
We shouldn't.
unfairly because these people do not necessarily deserve to be elevated to such lofty
Especially
loftiness.
politicians.
Well, politicians or anybody who happens to be in the public sphere, they are not just because they're smart or wise doesn't mean that they
Or
are
popular.
worthy of being
Or
put on-
eloquent, yeah.
or eloquent doesn't mean that they should be put on a pedestal above any other. And I think that that's one of the things that Masonry teaches us that we sometimes, let's say, always forget
Yeah.
is that it's not those external things, those shiny things that make a person Masonic or moral. It's those other internal things that humanize us.
Just because y'all said Hitler more than 3 times, he wasn't a great leader. He was
No,
the right, he
I
was
mean,
the right
yeah.
guy at the right place for that group that wanted him.
Right, and
he had people
the
around him
same
that
could
made
be
him
said with
powerful.
anybody else.
Yeah, everything is a cascade of
he was
coincidences.
a failed
Right.
artist,
But-
but hung
but-
out at the right bar.
But ultimately, my point is that we shouldn't be elevating these people above what they are, which
Yeah.
is
Don't-
flawed human beings.
Don't look at Albert Pike as a luminary. That's the key. Like, he's not a luminary. He may have done some great things for Masonry, and that's cool, and we can
Said some really cool things,
and we can appreciate those things. He also wrote a book that is entirely a beating to read.
That is also credited for calling us Satan worshippers.
Wow.
Well, he's
But if you read it correctly, the way he wrote it, he's making fun of people that think that in the first place.
The ignorance will do what the ignorance does.
yeah.
Yes, but if you would let that one little sentence out of Morals and Dogma, well, they'd find something else to blame us. for.
If people are going to hate, they're going to hate on us no
We
matter
don't- we
what.
don't
So-
Well, and I think the other thing we're talking about here is as Masons, when we start talking about particular people or we start kind of getting into something, like say for instance, I had never heard of Albert Pike before, and I was like, I heard he wrote this book called Morals and Dogma. I think I'll pick it up and start reading it and things like that. And then you just kind of
You sound very Yorkite right now.
yeah, really. You kind of blindly go into it without asking questions or without doing some research and going, well, there's a problematic thing here, but maybe reconciling that and going, okay, I understand that this is what what this man did, but I'm not listening necessarily to his message. I'm listening to I'm thinking about something he said and reflecting on that. I think that's where, as Masons, we need to step up to the mark to be the guys that are thinking about what we're reading. And yeah, let me put it that way. We should be thinking about what we're reading, not the person that wrote it.
To some extent, I'd say, yeah.
In those types of
we have to
instances as well.
try to avoid the moral relativism, right? Because George Washington largely is viewed positively by most people, I would
Right.
say. I mean, there's a few hardcore,
Also owned slaves.
yeah, but he owned slaves, right? And that's the thing, right? So if George Washington is largely viewed
Thomas Jefferson.
in this country as a positive thing, Thomas Jefferson is about 50-50. Ben Franklin is largely viewed as positive, but they were all problematic in that way in that time of slave owning, former aristocratic
Right.
or land owning families. And it's moral relativism. It's the same thing when we talk about something as simple as the conquistadors coming to the Americas, right, and then going to Mexico, and everybody's like, oh, the big bad conquistadors and the Europeans came here and they ruined everything. Well, the natives were eating humans, and so what do you do? How do we play this moral relativism game? Who's worse? Everybody's worse.
And I think that is ultimately the thing that we need to keep in mind is that we can't separate the person who wrote a document from the document itself. We can't separate those two things out because, like I mentioned before, Albert Pike wasn't writing to black people. He was writing to Masons that were almost certainly white. And so every one of these moral values that he's extolling, he's leveraging them to white audiences from a white guy. And so we can't separate those things out. And that's important to know as we think about what we're reading. And as we read it, we understand his context so we can understand what he meant more. It's the same thing that we do when we interpret the Bible. We first have to understand who wrote it, who are they writing it to, why did they write it, and then understand what they wrote in the lens of to whom it was written and why it was written.
Well, even further, you have to translate what it actually says, or why the translation doesn't mean what it originally meant, because the
Right,
translator was biased.
and all of those things
Which
go into that.
trying
And
to
trying to
read Pike-
translate Pike is, I mean,
Just as
there's
complicated.
yeah, he is a complicated. I've tried to read that book on a couple of occasions.
It always makes me think of the scene in Monty Python when the monks are bashing the tomes on their head.
That's kind of how I feel whenever I try to read Morals and Dogma. And that's not a statement of value. I'm sure it's a great book. I just can't get through it.
I also
And that's coming from
have
somebody
this-
who
Right.
loves reading Leviticus. by the
81
way.
hours of
81
theology.
hours of seminary.
81 hours. I can also imagine people, our listeners that are overseas, especially our listeners in England, thinking, "Thank God we got rid of those 13 colonies."
Those people off the rails.
How about those upstart Brits, though? They're like, oh, the Americans are having problems with slavery. Let's beat them to the punch. We'll just outlaw it over here first. We'll take all the credit for ending slavery. Like,
Right?
But not everywhere.
upstart Brits, I'm calling you out.
Yeah, it's crazy that and this isn't going to go away. We certainly are sitting around a table talking about this as people in a context, and it's not like we've solved the problem here about how to deal with this, because
But what we're doing.
we still got people arguing that Albert Pike's statue should be taken down or stay down. There are plenty of
definitely
people who
not.
believe that
He's a
it's
luminary.
been put back
Stay.
up and that it should remain up, and he is a Masonic luminary, and we shouldn't be taking down Confederate statues and all.
Well,
those
and you
things.
know
So
what? Maybe this is
there's a
also
lot
maybe this is a cautionary tale for people going forward. When we start thinking about somebody that might be in our contemporary time, that we start looking at and going, "Oh, this guy is this Masonic luminary," and things like that. Okay, maybe it's a cautionary tale that he's saying some great things, but we know that we may not know what's in the past, and before we start putting posters up of this guy and and kind of like propping him up in the corner and being like, poster boy, watch it.
Well, a statue does not require worship.
Oh no,
Like having statues of things or memorials of things sometimes is a lesson, a cautionary tale, a lesson learned in the negative. And when they say those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it, and if we just put all that stuff away and be like, "Ooh, that was bad," we can't talk about it. It's gonna happen again. We have to remember.
But the other thing too, just like we're doing here, is we're sitting discussing it. We're talking about it.
Well, we're all nerds.
recognizing it, huh?
We're all nerds. History
Well,
nerds
I'm
and
not a
nerds.
nerd.
You're a super nerd.
Yeah, you of the nerds,
You-
you are the leader.
Hold on, you
I am. Y'all voted for me.
Oh yeah, the card
literally
carrying.
the
But you
leader.
were first, and then you were second, and then you were after me.
Anyone who researches different strains of yeast or hops and then spends time developing their skills.
Yeah, whenever
that's
you
a
have
nerd.
a list of your favorite bacterial strains for fermentation, I think you get counted as a nerd.
Nerd.
Next Masonic podcast.
how does
What
our-
makes a nerd?
How does our cameraman feel about this conversation? He's over there.
Oh Lord,
He's over there not paying
he is
attention
not
to us right
interested
now.
at all. He's like,
He's a
I'm
nerd
on my
too.
phone
Which,
paying
by the
attention to
way,
this."
it's probably time for us to
Just call
shout
me
out.
nerd.
we probably should.
We probably should shout out our amazing sponsor, Brew, a home-owned, Texas-owned meadery right here in the heart of Fort Worth that is producing, I would say, the best
Fantastic
mead in the
mead,
country.
thank you. Yes.
Fantastic mead.
The
and
Mazer Cup agreed, or at least top two.
top two.
Top two.
Wow. So, he's doing great things. And if you haven't gotten your holiday orders in yet, ladies and gentlemen, you better, because my understanding is stock is low. So,
Do
and
we-
he also wants to sleep.
Do we
Like,
have a code that we could use?
I believe we do. What is that, Brother Cody? Because I don't have
Why
it
are
in
you
front of me.
asking me like I know this thing? What is it?
FW 148.
FW148. And how much does that save our fair
Um,
listeners?
10% on coffee and merch, maybe on me, depending on what state you're in.
Yeah. And obviously, if you're listening from states like Georgia, Kentucky, and a
Oh.
couple of others, you might not be able to get it because
He does
they
coffee too, by the way.
Yeah, and he does coffee, great coffee. I'm going to tell you that if you want that mead for your holiday extravaganza this year over Christmas, you better get your orders in because it's selling out. He's over here shaking his head yes.
Drink like a Viking.
Drink like a Viking and enjoy some B&Brew. By the way, he also gets his honey from right here in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
as well.
Don't
So,
give out that secret.
I'm not saying where.
Yeah,
It is 100% local Texas
Local
honey.
Texas, brewed, fermented, all the fun
That's
things.
why
around
we
here.
don't have any allergies. We've drunk
We've drunk
enough
so much
mead.
mead that I am immune to the pollen here in Texas now.
Pollen gets near our body, and it's like,
And it's just like,
what is that? Nope, nope.
nope. So go check out B&Brew. They are a great group. Veteran-owned, Masonic-owned, and local here to the great state of Texas. So,
That puts us right at an hour.
all right.
All right,
So
we're good.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening and to the Supreme Leader in North Korea, thank you once again for your listenership. Thank you to all the people around the world who are listening. We've got some folks listening from Ukraine. We've got some folks listening from across the pond in England.
Do we have any Dutch people listening?
Well, of course.
We've got lots of
They
people
all
listening,
watched
and we
Max
really appreciate it.
Verstappen win the Formula One race last night.
This is also our first live video recording. So,
I feel like we should apologize to the people
Sorry.
who are watching
I'm
this.
sorry if I'm ugly.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
This is just my face.
I got my Red Bull shirt out. I was gonna wear it, but I figured it was too much.
Yeah, you might. Yeah, they're not ready to sponsor us
I'm
yet,
a
but
huge
when they
Formula
do,
One fan.
get out there.
You
Red
didn't
Bull.
even say Verstappen.
Super Max.
So yeah, as always, if you have an opinion, if we are wrong about something, comment down below. If we are right about something, comment down below.
If we're
Like,
ugly.
follow all the things that need to
we know
happen.
we're
All of the things.
All the things.
Hit the subscribe button.
Hit that subscribe button on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on the YouTube. It's amazing.
The YouTubes. That's
on the YouTubes, the tubes, the series of tubes that all connect.
all of those things.
But we are here to interact with you. If you've got something that you want to say or you got some feedback for us, let us know. Cody is more than happy to field your questions and your comments and all of those things because
Honestly,
he's
now
the
I
one
have
who
to
fields
respond
them.
to
It's
these
usually
things.
a mirror Evve, but
Yeah.
It's I've been reading the comments and we really appreciate all the feedback, positive and negative.
if
So,
the response is more than a 5th grade reading level, it was Evve.
yes, that's it because I'm
81 hours.
81 hours. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. Our brothers around the state and around the country, thank you for making us part of your Masonic Day. And my name is Evve Kirkendall, and I'm signing off.
My name is Sean DeBon, signing off.
Brandy Patton, sign off.
And this is Cody Cox signing off.